So today's lecture is on nutrition for optimal cholesterol. And I'm going to admit that this was a difficult one for me to create. So you guys are the first people that are hearing this particular presentation. And I think I'm going to have some refinement I'm going to have to do, because cholesterol in general as a topic is very complex, very complex. So it was hard for me to keep it not complex, and we'll see how I did. Okay, so here's some questions that we are going to answer today. I won't go read them all, but these all contribute to our understanding of cholesterol, so we know what we can do about it. All right, so we will answer each of these at this presentation. Okay, so what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is a molecule that has 27 carbons. So that's not very informative, is it? That's it right here. That's cholesterol. So this is important for us to understand, because we use the word cholesterol synonymously with what's going on in our blood that contributes to increasing our risk of a coronary event. And it's not exactly the same. We need to actually get a little bit more specific in our understanding of what cholesterol is. Because why do we care? So first of all, where does it come from? Like, where does the cholesterol in our blood, where does it come from? Well, the interesting thing is, only 20% comes from our food, and about 80% comes from our liver. Most people don't realize that, and we recycle almost all of our cholesterol too, back through in our intestines. So the question I hope some of you are asking is, well, this whole time I've been trying to change what I eat, which we'll talk about diet and how that contributes to your cholesterol, but not maybe in the way you suspected. But it's your liver that's supposed to be regulating how much cholesterol is in your blood, okay? All right, so when you eat something, so now we're going to talk about the 20% that you eat. All right, so you eat it, and it goes through your intestines, so dietary cholesterol, it's in your intestines. It gets packaged into these things called chylomicrons, which is a fancy name, and then this chylomicron then gets released into the blood, and then it gets identified by the liver. The liver filters 22 gallons of blood an hour and 250 gallons a day. So you should be asking yourself, if it filters that much of my blood, why isn't it filtering out the cholesterol that's not supposed to be there? Right? Why am I having high cholesterol? What's going on? Well, if you look, there's this little thing that looks like a hook right here, right? And that's a receptor that's in the liver that recognizes the cholesterol, specifically this chylomicron that came from your food from the intestines. And it has to fit like a key in a lock. And if it's healthy, meaning if the chylomicron is nice, healthy, chylomicron, then it'll fit and the liver will pull it out. And that's typically what happens with our food, which is great. So in other words, when we eat fat, this process works typically for most people very well. Your intestines packages it in a chylomicron, it goes through your blood, the liver sees it and pulls it out of the blood immediately. Okay, this is why food cholesterol is not as much of a problem as we all think, although it can be for other reasons, and I'll explain. Then the liver takes this chylomicron, breaks it up into different kinds of packages. And that's the things that we're familiar with on our blood panel we have every year, like LDL, HDL. It packages that fat that we ate into a different kinds of cholesterol, and then it releases it back out into the bloodstream. Okay, so now it's back out here as LDL and VLDL. See, it comes out, right, as VLDL, and then this is intermediate DL, and this is called LDL. And we're going to learn a lot more about this. So things go wrong when the receptors that recognize these lipoproteins aren't working the way we expect, okay? So if your liver doesn't recognize the lipoprotein as the blood gets filtered, then it won't filter it out of your blood. Instead, it just keeps circulating and it keeps circulating and it keeps circulating. And I'll explain how that happens. So once again, this is just a repeat slide for your reference. Cholesterol comes from your own body and the food you eat, and this is just a repeat of what I just said. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more. So what signals, this might have occurred to you, if the liver makes 80% of our cholesterol, what's the physiological trigger that tells the liver to dump all this cholesterol into our blood, right? And the answer is sugar and insulin. That's what tells our liver to dump more out. And specifically fructose, that's very, I hate saying the word bad, but that's a very clear trigger to your liver to release triglycerides specifically. So if you want your triglycerides to go up, drink a lot of fructose in the form of, you know, in orange juice and those kinds of things, and even sugary beverages have a lot of fructose. But fructose will raise your triglycerides because it tells the liver to dump triglycerides out. Okay, so what you're seeing here, you don't need to, there's going to be a lot of complicated images up today, but just ignore them except what I bring your attention to, because otherwise it's going to be too overwhelming probably. But so glucose and insulin are what trigger the liver to dump out different kinds of fats into your blood. Usually VLDL, okay? That's what's typically released by the liver into the bloodstream after it's taken the chylomicrons and repackaged them into this VLDL form. And, okay, so what are these lipoproteins? So remember, you eat, and then the fat that you eat and the cholesterol you eat gets absorbed through your intestines and packaged into chylomicrons. Those chylomicrons go to your liver repackages them, and then sends them back out into the blood as VLDL. So so VLDL is very low density lipoprotein, and that's what we're measuring on our blood lipid panels, this lipoprotein. And the lipoprotein, as you can see, it's made up two parts of the word, lipo, or the lipid, and this protein. So that should indicate to you that it's not just cholesterol floating around by itself, it's actually cholesterol that's packaged in a neat little package. And it has a membrane, that's this blue stuff is the membrane around it, and it has a protein exoskeleton. At least that's what some of the journals like to call it, and I like that word because it gives you a visual image. And this protein is in the membrane around all the lipids which are on the inside. So the inside has all the fat, that's the triglycerides and the cholesterol, and this membrane holds it all together, right? And these big green things right here are the protein, and they have a little typo here in this image. It should be apolipoprotein, so it should be an O in there. But basically, this green thing is supposed to represent the protein exoskeleton, and there's going to be some better pictures of it later. This is just one graphic sort of image of it. But these apoproteins we're going to find are critical to help your liver recognize that package in order to remove it from your blood. And if you damage this, if you damage these little ApoBs, they're called, then you've got a problem, because now you can start having this lipoprotein stick to your blood vessels. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So the blood lipid that contributes to atherosclerotic accumulation is oxidized LDL. So here's another little graphic image of a lipoprotein, right? And here it is when it has some stuff that this article talks about, and here it is when it's oxidized. So you notice it says ox-LDL, right? And if you look, that they just changed the color of the little thread-looking things. Those thread-looking things represent the ApoB protein, that exoskeleton that's in the membrane. And what they're trying to depict is that from here to here, it's changing. It's a modified ApoB. Do you see how it says modified right here? ApoB and ApoB. And so all I'm trying to bring your attention to is that when you damage the LDL in your blood, it changes this little protein, and then that can no longer be recognized by the LDL receptor in your liver, and your liver cannot filter it out of your blood. Okay? And that's why you start getting higher and higher cholesterol levels. So you could be asking, well, and we will get to it, how does this ApoB get damaged? And we'll talk about it. But here's just another picture, graphical representation. Here's an LDL with an ApoB protein in the membrane, and then it starts getting mildly oxidized, but the receptor, that's the receptor, see this little purple thing right here? The receptor can still recognize it, right? It's still recognizing it, everything's okay, because these LDL receptors are in the liver, and they're in other tissues that need the LDL, that need the fat, right? But then, all of a sudden, when it's highly oxidized, see how they made it squiggly on the outside? The receptor doesn't recognize it anymore. So now, this receptor over here recognizes it. And so, this is a macrophage, and now this other type of cell, which is a type of, comes from a monocyte, which is a type of white blood cell, will stick to this highly oxidized LDL, and it turns into a foam cell. And a foam cell is what makes the fatty streaks in your arteries. Okay, so we're going to talk about it a little bit more. Here's a whole paper that talks about how oxidized LDL is really the basis of atherosclerosis, that's building plaque in your arteries. And even though this lecture's on cholesterol, really what we care about, we don't care about the cholesterol molecule itself. What we care about is how cholesterol contributes to arterial plaque. That's what we care about, right? So we really need to understand what is causing the plaque. And it's oxidized LDL, typically, that has a damaged ApoB. Okay, so here it is again. Here's oxidation, and they're trying to change the colors to make it look like, okay, that little thread thing changed. But you can also damage it through glycosylation, which is a sugar molecule sticking to the protein. So what you're looking at here is these little glucose molecules. That's what those yellow things are. They're representing glucose molecules sticking to the ApoB thread, right? So that will also damage the ApoB. And then here's another way called carbonylation. I'm not going to go into that. These are 3 different ways you can damage your ApoB. That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so what triggers this LDL oxidation? So glycation, it should be a little bit more easy to understand. If you've got sugar in your bloodstream, chronically high sugar, high blood sugar, you're going to glycate the ApoBs on your lipids, right? So you got these little lipoproteins, and there's this exoskeleton, and you're damaging the exoskeleton, and you're making it unrecognizable for your liver's LDL receptors. So the liver can't get it out, or won't, not as efficiently anyway. So what kinds of stuff triggers it? Well, trans fats, fried foods, pastries, tobacco, smoking tobacco, excess alcohol consumption, heavy metal exposure. Typically that would be from your dental fillings, your amalgams, right? Mold exposure, like black mold in the house. All of these things have been proven in studies to contribute to the oxidation of the lipoproteins in our blood, because they just cause an increased inflammation. And like I said, I'm trying to keep this lecture as simple as possible while on a very complex topic. So also, chronic inflammation can cause the oxidation of the LDL. And that can be not sleeping well, so sleep apnea. It can be infections in your mouth. So like this book right here, this whole book talks about how this is hidden dental abscesses and root canals get infections and are the real secret reason why people have heart attacks. And the reason why is because of this oxidation of the cholesterol that happens, and then that leads to coronary artery disease, which leads to eventually occlusion of the vessel, right? So, but it's all because of the slow drip of pathogens from the root of the tooth, of the root canal tooth, that's very, very close to your carotid artery. They've actually done DNA analysis of the plaque from a carotid artery, and it's the exact same bacteria that's in your mouth. So you do not want bleeding gums, and you do not want any hidden dental abscesses, because that will contribute to inflaming the arteries and oxidizing the cholesterol. But it's not just about oxidizing cholesterol. It's also about the health of the endothelial lining. So there's 2 pieces to this puzzle, and we're still only talking about 1 piece. Okay, so this one, physiological basis for the superiority of ApoB over LDL, okay, as a marker for cardiovascular risk. And so this is where we're going now. This is like, I don't want to say cutting edge, but it's definitely out there among the cardiovascular community of doctors. They understand that really what we care about is the ApoB, is, how many lipoproteins do we have that has this particular protein. Those are the lipoproteins that get embedded into the arterial wall. It's the ApoB lipoproteins. And you'll learn a little bit more in a little while, so we're going to get there. Okay, so this is a quote from that study, so this study right here, okay, and it says, neither triglycerides nor LDL are accurate markers. While they're both atherogenic, which means they both can cause plaque buildup, there's no way to integrate their risk ApoB simplifies this. So what happens is you can have LDL and HDL and all the stuff that's measured on your lipid panel, but if they're not damaged, if the ApoB isn't damaged, then it won't stick and cause foam cells. Does that make sense? So what they're finding is we have to get more specific. We have to get a lot more specific about how we're measuring and determining cardiovascular risk from our lipid panels. So a more accurate one is ApoB. So if you're worried about your risk of cardiovascular disease, you can ask your primary care physician to include in your lipid panel ApoB. Maybe they'll ask why. You can say that you've learned that ApoB is a much more accurate indicator of cardiovascular risk, and they cannot argue with that because that is the truth, and it's been proven. So ApoB is not the final step in, instead of saying dyslipidemia, which is what doctors will typically say if you have all of your lipids out of whack, meaning your HDL is too low and your LDL is too high and all of that, they'll say that it's dyslipidemia. Well, they're saying this is a better word because it's dyslipoproteinemia, meaning it's the actual protein, the ApoB, that gets damaged in the membrane of the lipoprotein. That's actually the problem. That's the problem, right? Okay, so all cholesterol within atheroma was deposited there from within an ApoB particle. So there are lipids, like VLDLs, that don't have, well, it depends on the VD. We'll talk about it, but the ones that come straight from the liver brand new typically have ApoB48, I believe. And so they're not ApoB100. And so there's different kinds of the ApoB. There's different kinds. And it's the ApoB100 typically that are the ones that cause atherosclerosis. Okay, so basically, we need to pay attention to this, and you can measure it. There's some great measurements for it. So where do these thresholds come from? So this is like on a basic lipid panel, right? We have our total cholesterol or triglycerides. These are what sometimes they'll include VLDL, sometimes they won't in a basic lipid panel. And so what we really need to be, in my opinion, if you want to get a good idea of an assessment of your risk, of your cholesterol health, and it's really your lipoprotein health, right? If we want to be specific, it's your lipoprotein health. You really want ApoB. And if you want to get your Lp(a) measured as well, that's okay. You can do that. These could be useful, but this is the big one right here. That's the one that I would really want. If you have familial hypercholesterolemia, a genetic condition that is inherited and gives you a tendency towards very, very high cholesterol, then I would recommend you get your Lp(a) tested as well. But if you don't have FH, familial hypercholesterolemia, it's less useful. But I like these a lot too for a more advanced cholesterol type panel, because what happens is homocysteine and HSCRP, C-reactive protein, are indicators of inflammation in your body, and those will tell you if you're oxidizing your LDL or not. Right? So you want to keep these low, these two, homocysteine and HSCRP, because that means you have low inflammation in your blood, in your arterial walls, and you're not as likely to be building and accumulating plaque. Okay, so let's keep going. However, this is also from that same study, ApoB is not the only issue, and I love that the authors put this sentence in here because they really hit the nail on the head. We must learn much more about the processes that alter the trapping of ApoB particles within the arterial wall. So just because you've got these oxidized LDLs and you've got these damaged ApoB, exoskeletons, that doesn't mean you're going to build a plaque with it just because you have them. What you have here is a sticky lipoprotein, meaning it wants to stick to something, it really wants to stick, but it won't stick if your arterial walls are healthy. If you have, because we have a natural, it's like a Teflon slick coating on the inside of our arteries. And even if you have sticky cholesterol, and even if you have a lot of it, it won't stick if you have healthy arterial walls. So we have to really look at two different components here. The cholesterol itself and what makes it sticky. And then we also have to figure out why is it getting trapped in the arterial wall in the first place? What's making it want to stick there, right? And that's the fundamental cause of atherosclerosis, is ApoB lipoproteins being stuck in there. Okay, so, and I like that they said this too. We're just at the beginning of understanding what's going on, and that's totally the truth. And, this is such a complex topic. Okay, so lipoprotein metabolism. When you say this, you need to be thinking to yourself, liver. The liver is what controls what we absorb and what he puts back into the blood, right? It's like the liver. And so here's our chylomicron. That's after you eat, your intestines absorb the fat, packages it into a chylomicron, puts it in the bloodstream. It's a huge package. It's really big, right? It never gets stuck in the arterial walls because it's way too big. And the liver, the receptors, there are receptors on the liver that recognize it, and it immediately goes to the liver. Then the liver spits out these ones right here. It repackages it and spits these ones out for the rest of the tissues in the body that might need it. Okay? And so they get smaller as they go. And so I'm going to keep going so we can talk about this. All right, so here's the receptors on the liver that recognize the LDL, right, that bring it back in. Because the liver's just constantly spitting out lipoproteins and pulling ones back in to recycle and to repackage in different ways. It's what controls all of it. So we have LDL receptors on the liver. And so it spits out stuff, the VLDL, and then it comes back in, and it keeps doing these things. Now, where does statins fit into this whole equation? Well, the liver, we all know, creates 80% of our cholesterol in our body, and statins basically block this one enzyme called HMG CoA reductase, and it prevents the liver from making cholesterol. So it can't make cholesterol anymore. So that's what statins do. And it does work. But as you'll see here, this is where that enzyme is. So this is the physiological biochemical pathway that creates cholesterol in the liver. Okay? So we're way up here, and here it is, HMG CoA reductase, and you're blocking this enzyme right here, which means all of these other biochemical reactions that happen are now inhibited. So as a naturopathic physician, I don't like inhibiting something that is so far upstream because it can cause all kinds of downstream effects, right? And that are hard to even describe. And this was the simplest one. I looked at 50 different ones to try to show you guys, but they were so complex I didn't think you could even see it because it was so, it has a huge effect downstream in a myriad of ways. So I would rather our liver create brand new cholesterol from our food that we're eating, and the chylomicrons come in and it produces brand new VLDL, and I would rather it recognize the old LDL that's in the bloodstream and filter it out so we can excrete it, right? That to me is like, let's get rid of the old cars and put new cars out on the road, right? You know, so instead of inhibiting the production and keeping all the old ones, because remember, if the old ones keep circulating in your blood, they get more and more chance to be oxidized. So now you can't replace them with new because you've got only old in there, right? Okay, so it's something to keep in mind. You know, it's up to you. Okay, so this is another pretty simplistic image that is trying to show you that the chylomicron looks different in size and composition, and the proteins that are in the membrane, they all are different. That was the point, okay? So here it is. I love this image right here. So the VLDL comes out, right? So chylomicrons come in, they get repackaged into VLDL, and what you're looking at here, I love the way the graphic person drew the ApoB on this one. And this one, that little swirls, those little green swirls, that's one ApoB molecule that's spun all around, and that's more of how it is instead of a big globule, right? It's like this exoskeleton that's in the membrane, the protein is, that's woven in and around everything that holds it together, okay? But if you look, this blue area, you can't see it, but it says TG right there, that's triglycerides. And this right here says CE, and that's cholesterol esters. So the first thing that comes out, it's mainly triglycerides in here. And then as it starts getting used and it starts getting circulated through the body and tissues the triglycerides get released from the package, then the triglyceride ratio goes down and the cholesterol goes up in terms of the ratio that's inside the package. And so now you've got, but if you notice there's VLDL 1, 2, 3, if you know, in medicine We make it seem so simple. There's just LDL and HDL, and that's so far from the truth. There are subsets of each of these. And so now we've got intermediate DL, density lipoproteins. Now we've got our low level. And so by the time you get to LDL3, it's much, much smaller, right? It has different proteins in the exoskeleton now, and it's hardly any triglycerides in it, and it's more cholesterol. So the point I'm making is lipoproteins have three basic things about them, right? They've got their membrane with an ApoB exoskeleton protein, and they've got composition, and they've got size. And all of those three things contribute to how sticky it is, okay? But this right here, this is like, represents all the different LDLs, like the subsets. So it gets complicated. Now, people with familial hypercholesterolemia, they have this little ApoA right here. It's called lipoprotein little a is how we refer to it. And that little thing right there makes it especially dangerous. And so it's not something that I think most people have to check, but if you have familial hypercholesterolemia, that's a really good one to monitor and to look into what you can do about it. But if you notice here, ApoB48, I had said, was the big ones. Here, 48. Once you get to 100, there's like a line right here. Do you see how they have a blue squiggly line, and then it's green, green, green? It's the ApoB 100s that typically get embedded in your arterial wall. Okay, so here's just another thing that says what I just said already, which is this is mainly triglycerides, less triglycerides, mainly cholesterol. So, and then if you look, this represents the ApoB, the type of apoprotein that's in the membrane. So this is another one, I'm trying to really emphasize how complicated cholesterol is. It is not a simple topic, and it's not as simple as you think. This shows that the lipoproteins that are likely to stick have to do with their density. So this one's really showing a density division. So these are all denser than these. Does that make sense? So this is a density type of illustration. This one is volume. This one's talking about the size, okay? So basically it's saying the ones that stick, into the intima of the artery, which we're going to talk about, are right around in here, okay? So both the density and the size of the lipoprotein and the actual protein itself make a difference on whether or not it's going to stick to your arterial walls. All right, so why do we need cholesterol? Your liver makes this cholesterol. It's got to be making it for some reason, right? It's got to be used for something in the body. It's used in every single cell membrane. Our cell membranes are made of phospholipids, and in between all the phospholipids that have a positive and negative sort of orientation, they call it heads and tails. So it's like you see all the heads up here, and the heads are on the bottom. It makes like a sandwich, and all the tails touch each other, right? That's what our membranes look like in our body. And then there's little cholesterols that are embedded everywhere, and that makes the cell membrane in our body. So we need cholesterol for every cell. It's super necessary. We also need it to make testosterone and estrogen. So a lot of people who work really hard and take all kinds of statins and other things to lower their total cholesterol start finding that their testosterone goes down. And so that's a side effect. It can be a side effect of lowering your cholesterol, what I would consider too much, is starting to have testosterone issues. Okay, and you also need to make vitamin D. A lot of medical professionals consider vitamin D more of a hormone. And so, once again, we use cholesterol to make hormones. That's what we do. And then lastly, for cognitive health, our brain is almost all cholesterol, but it's not cholesterol from our liver because that won't go through the blood-brain barrier. We actually make it in our brain, which is a whole nother story. But the point I'm making is we need it for all kinds of things. It's extremely important. We just, in my professional opinion, what we're trying to do and what we need to do is keep the cholesterol healthy, and then we need to get rid of the old cholesterol. Right? We don't want it circulating. We want to retire it when it needs to be retired and replace it with new, which you can't do if you're taking very well if you're taking statins. Okay, so here's the summary of cholesterol takeaway points, but then I've got a lot more. Okay, so most of our blood is made from, our blood lipids are made, and it's really lipoproteins, if I'm specific, okay, are made from our liver. They're packaged into lipoproteins. They have an exoskeleton. And the composition of the membrane, that means that ApoB changes as the triglycerides are released. The liver regulates this. the protein exoskeleton, ApoB, is altered and oxidized, and it's more sticky, and then cholesterol is needed for all kinds of things. Okay, so how does plaque form? This is what our arteries look like. We have 3 layers in our arteries, and this is extremely important. And every one of them is important, the health of it, for cholesterol not to stick. So what I'm trying to show you here is that the very, very, very inside of the artery, there are 3 layers, but in the tunica intima, which is the inner layer, the final layer is called the endothelial lining, and it's 1 cell thick, and it's little endothelial cells that are lined up like bricks. So that's what you're seeing. They're lined up like bricks. How many of you have heard of leaky gut, like leaky gut syndrome, you know? What happens is, when you get an atherosclerotic plaque, you can think of it as leaky blood vessel. Because the endothelial lining, just like in your gut, you have enterocytes. And the enterocytes start separating when you get inflamed, and that's what causes leaky gut. Well, in this case, we have endothelial cells, and they start separating just a little bit because they get irritated because of what's in the blood, insulin and glucose. Okay? They get irritated, and they get irritated for other reasons too, but those are the primary ones, and then they start separating just a little bit, these brick cells, and that's when the cholesterol starts sticking to them and seeping into the underlayer. So I'm going to show you some other pictures. So what actually is plaque? I like this picture because it shows that the blood vessel expands outward as the plaque builds, and a lot of illustrations online are very misleading. You can have a tremendous amount of plaque buildup, and it doesn't go like this into your artery to the lumen. The lumen is the hole, right? So when you build up plaque, people think it just goes like this, right? And it doesn't. It builds up the plaque and it pushes the blood vessel outward. It pushes it that way. And it's not until you have a ton of plaque, like 85%, that it starts occluding the vessel. But you can have virtually 100% of the same lumen diameter open, even with a ton of plaque, okay? You just have stable plaque is what we want. So the point I'm making is I like this illustration because it pushes the blood vessel outward, and that's what happens. Eventually, it will start encroaching in the middle. Okay, so what is the actual disease progression? What happens is, we've talked about this already a ton, we have oxidized LDL. So I put a blue arrow there. That's what starts the disease progression, okay? And then, I'm going to show you some better pictures that show what goes on here. Then you start having, remember I said you should have your HSCRP checked, because that's going to tell you if you have inflammation in your arterial walls, right? You don't want inflammation because that's going to make the endothelial lining separate and allow the cholesterol to get in there. All right, so let's keep going a little bit. Here's a better picture. So once again, LDL oxidation happens right here. You have oxidized LDL, okay? That's these little yellow particles. And if you look, these little cells right here, that's the endothelial lining. 1 cell thick, right? And if you look, this little red right there, it's showing that they're separating. It's separating, and then that allows the cholesterol to get underneath the basement membrane, because it's like the bricks are on top of this waterproof membrane or something, okay? And that's the basement membrane. And so it's getting underneath there, and it's getting into the tunica intima, which is smooth muscle cells. It's embedding itself. Well, it's not supposed to be there. These little yellow dots aren't supposed to be there. So then these monocytes, which are our white blood cells, okay, they'll start squeezing in too. So here's another little gap between the leaky cells, right? And that monocyte shimmies in there, right? Because monocytes go after invaders. Anything that's not supposed to be there, it wants to chomp it up, right? So it gets in there and it starts chomping up all of those little LDLs that aren't supposed to be in there. And so that's what you're seeing here is a monocyte that is now turned into a macrophage, and it's gobbled up all the LDLs, and now you have foam cells. And they just keep multiplying and multiplying until you have a big fatty streak, and that's your plaque, okay? So what you should be thinking in your head is, how do we stop this at the beginning? Like, what started this whole cascade of events? Okay, we're going to go back over here, right? We have our monocytes, and we have our LDL that's sticking and then going into our leaky endothelial lining. So we want to make sure we shore up our endothelial lining, right, and make it healthy and not inflamed, so nothing wants to stick to it, okay? All right, so this is another picture saying the same thing. It's showing the monocytes shimmying in between the endothelial cells, right? Okay, same thing, just a different graphic artist. Now this is the fun part that a lot of people don't know about. but it's becoming more and more talked about in the medical community. It's the glycocalyx. How many of you have heard of the glycocalyx? Okay, well now you have, so you guys are ahead of the game. So what happens is you have this endothelial lining that's like, imagine a tunnel that's lined with bricks, okay? Only one brick thick, because that's the endothelial cells. Well, there's actually another layer on top of that called the glycocalyx. And imagine a shaggy carpet, like a thick shag carpet lining the entire brick tunnel, okay? That shag carpet with those little threads are made out of like Teflon. They're really slippery, super slippery, and that's the glycocalyx. And that's what keeps all the blood vessels moving along smoothly and not sticking to anything, even if they bump up against the wall. And they have a charge. This whole glycocalyx, okay, has a charge, and that charge repels the red blood cells, because the red blood cells are also negative. So if you have negative and negative, they repel each other. And it keeps all the red blood cells in the center, so they don't actually even hit the endothelial lining. They don't even hit the bricks. The shag carpet keeps everything going where it wants to go. Okay, so here's pictures of it. This is what the glycocalyx looks like. Here's the layer of endothelial cells. This is a very healthy glycocalyx, okay? Healthy glycocalyx. That's what you want. So even if you have super sticky cholesterol because you have high blood sugar, okay, you can actually, it won't stick to your blood vessels if you can just keep the glycocalyx healthy, okay? So here it is again. Here's the pink. This is another, healthy glycocalyx right here. But look at this one. Here the hairs aren't as much. You don't see as much. And you see the cells? They have these little gaps between the cells, right? That's the problem right there, right? So then you have to ask, well, what causes this? Like, what causes the glycocalyx to not be healthy? Sugar. It's glucose in your bloodstream. And insulin, high insulin. So here it is again. We're talking about just another rendition of, because this is a topic that's all over the place right now in the medical community, is trying to understand this glycocalyx. Okay, so the reason I put this up here, and it's a lot, you're looking at a carotid artery, and the carotid artery bifurcates, right? It separates into two. And anytime as a mechanical design engineer in my past, that's what I was, I understand that anytime you split a fluid flow, you get backflow. You get flow reversals like eddies in the river. So here we go. Here are backflows and our turbulence. That, if you can't see it real well, but there's these yellow hairs up here, that's the glycocalyx, and you have this nice laminar flow. And then, right where the bifurcation happens, you get backflow and turbulence, and it destroys the glycocalyx there. Okay, it can damage the glycocalyx. So, in this particular paper, they say glycocalyx degradation, which then leads to endothelial dysfunction, right? Because the endothelial lining starts separating. Once that happens, you start getting a tremendous amount of plaque buildup, which is why a lot of people get plaque buildup in their carotid arteries, right? But it's also because of hidden dental abscesses that's leaking pathogens, which is also destroying the glycocalyx, because toxins in the blood will also cause this glycocalyx to be damaged, right? Heavy metals. So when you have everything working against you, you have backflow and turbulent flow, and you have toxins leaking from your root canal teeth in your mandible, then it's a recipe for a disaster. Here's a better picture of it that's showing the whole process, right? The oxidized LDL, it's starting to leak through the monocytes, starting to make foam cells. There you go. Okay, so it happens other places in your body too, though, not just the carotid artery. Anywhere there's a big artery and there's a bifurcation, it can happen. It happens for a lot of people in the artery that's right behind your knee, called the popliteal artery. A little story, I had a friend, while I was in medical school, he was a machinist when I was a mechanical engineer. He was a baseball catcher. So he sat for hours like this all the time, right? I mean, for 50 years, he was a baseball catcher. And so he told me, Deb, I got to go in and they're going to open me up and scrape out, I think there's a name for this surgery, I can't remember the name of it, but basically they open up the artery just like they do with the carotid, and they scrape out all the plaque, okay? And the way you know you have it is because your calf muscle hurts when you walk. It's called claudication, right? So people will walk and all of a sudden their calf muscle hurts. Well, that's usually because the popliteal artery has plaque in it. And the reason why a catcher would potentially have this problem is because you're bending and stretching that artery over and over and over again, and it causes damage to the glycocalyx because you're using it a lot. So repetitive injuries, any kind of repetitive anything can damage the artery, and that's where you're going to get plaque buildup. It's where you've damaged the artery. Okay, we can do stuff to keep our arteries healthy. So this is just showing the percentage of where usually the things happen, right? So the biggest is in the leg is the popliteal artery. All right, so now we're getting to, okay, so now you got all this plaque. Well, who cares? Just as long as blood's getting by, you know, what we care about is the plaque ruptures. If it ruptures, then your body sees that as an injury, sort of like you injuring your skin. You know, it sees this layer and the smooth muscle that's migrated up and created a fibrous cap over the top of the fat, and when it breaks, it's not the plaque itself that causes the occlusion of the vessel. It's the fact that your body's like, oh, this is an injury, and we need to clot. We may need to make a blood clot here to fix it. So your body makes actually a blood clot over the ruptured plaque to try to heal the rupture, right? And it's the blood clot, the thrombosis that forms as a result of the rupture that actually causes the occlusion. So that's a whole other pathway of events, right? Okay, so we want, well, why does a plaque rupture? That's when you start to have a stable plaque and you got unstable plaque. And they have found in the studies that stable plaque, you can have tons of plaque, and if it's stable, you won't have a heart attack. And it's because, what makes it stable? You want the basement membrane. Remember I told you that brick tunnel, the bricks are all on like a waterproof membrane, they're all mounted on it. That waterproof membrane, in essence, because I'm trying to make a civil engineering analogy, that's our basement membrane. And that membrane has collagen in it, and collagen are proteins, and that's what creates a very stable plaque. And once you get the plaque is big enough, there are enzymes from the necrosis inside the fat, they call it necrotic core. It starts eating away at the basement membrane, and that's what causes it to rupture. Okay, so there's things you can do to strengthen the basement membrane, so to make sure that if you do have plaque, it remains stable and it doesn't rupture. And so this is, yet again, telling the whole process of how the thrombus forms sites. The thrombus forms at the site of the rupture, right? So the rupture itself isn't what causes the occlusion, it's the thrombus that forms. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So this is yet another picture of the same thing. If you notice, it's not the yellow stuff that's out here, it's red blood cells that are all stuck together with these little blue stars, right? So the thrombus is a blood clot that's attempting to cover up the top of the rupture. Okay, so here we go. So what causes the glycocalyx to be damaged? Well, we know mechanical stress from like being a baseball catcher, right, or something like that, but also that high blood sugar for only 6 hours reduced the volume of the glycocalyx by 50%. Just 6 hours of high blood sugar was enough to reduce the glycocalyx. That's crazy. That's just really, that's scary. It means we need to manage our blood sugar. That's what we need to do. Okay, here's another picture of it, right here. We have baseline, then they gave them glucose, went down here. That's the volume of the glycocalyx, right? That shag carpet that's like Teflon, that's preventing things from sticking, it's affected by blood sugar. Okay, so also high insulin promotes atherosclerosis, so insulin resistance accelerates it, and it's because the insulin is seen by the liver and it starts creating an effect. We won't go into it. You can read some of this more. When you have sugar in your bloodstream, it creates advanced glycation end products, which are proteins and lipids that have sugar stuck to them. We already showed that ApoB protein that had the glucose stuck to it. So this is a whole little video that talks about it. When you have your A1C tested on your labs, if you'll have your fasting blood glucose and your A1C. Your A1C is a 3-month average of how much sugar is stuck to your red blood cells. But it doesn't just stick to your red blood cells, it sticks to proteins, it sticks to lipids, and it sticks to your lipoproteins, right? So the ages are basically it's like your A1C for your lipoproteins, right? Okay, so now we know, these are our artery takeaways. We know that turbulent flow and reversals can cause damage from chronic excessive bending and stretching, and then chronic high blood glucose and insulin will make it sticky. So what can we do to reduce our coronary event? These two things. That's it. That's what you do. That's where our focus needs to be. It's on maintaining healthy blood and maintaining healthy arteries. And how do you do that? You do it with these right here. And I'm going to go through them all really, really quickly because we're already late, but I repeat it at the end, okay? All right, so this is, and you can read this anywhere online. These are the basics: alcohol, no smoking, alcohol moderation. Plant sterols is a big one. And I'm going to go through each of them a little bit more depth. Okay, so eat foods that will raise your HDL. Here's a list of them. You can get online and look up more. Just type in what foods will raise my HDL. What you want your HDL to be high because it actually helps attach to the old cholesterol and helps your liver get rid of it. So it acts as a transporter. HDL acts as a transporter to get rid of the oxidized LDL. So that's why you want it. Okay, garlic and onions have a component called allicin in them. Very, very effective at lowering your cholesterol levels. And onions, also another thing that's in garlic, especially aged black garlic, if you've ever heard of that, it has 7 different cysteines in black garlic, and it will slowly over time help regress arterial plaque. And so you can eat aged garlic, and it's delicious, actually, or you can buy kyolic garlic, and this is a measured form of aged black garlic. But garlic itself, raw, is also good. So both of them are extremely healthy for arterial health and cholesterol. All right, and onions have quercetin in them, which you want as well, and I think I have that right here. So quercetin is super good for preventing the oxidation of the LDL. Because remember, the LDL itself is not the problem, it's when it's oxidized and that exoskeleton is damaged. Okay, green tea and lemons and ginger, so those are 3 that work really good at helping reduce inflammation and supporting healthy cholesterol. Okay, and then also, you can get books on all this. I don't really think that they're necessary, honestly. I think the key is not eating packaged foods and eating is the food in its natural form as much as possible. That's really the key. Okay, so omega-3 fatty acids work really well at EPA is a type of omega-3 fatty acid that has a very big effect on arterial calcification. This is one of my favorites, but I have a whole bunch in here. This is one I take right here. It has a high amount of EPA compared to DHA, which is important. So you can read all about it. It remodels and stabilizes atherosclerosis and helps remove arterial calcifications. And we didn't even talk about calcifications. So here are 3. That's this one right here. But these are 2 that I've used in the past that work great. They have a very high amount of EPA, which is what you want for arterial health. Okay, niacin. This one, along with pantethine, are my number 1s. So if I had to pick one thing for you to do to try to normalize your lipids, like how do you, when I say normalize, I want you to have high cholesterol, because high cholesterol is good for your brain, it's good for your hormone health. What I want is it to be healthy cholesterol, really healthy, okay? So that way it doesn't stick to the arterial walls.
How do you know if it's healthy?
You check your ApoB. You have them check your ApoB. Yeah, and you look at your total cholesterol ratio relative to your HDL. So you total cholesterol to HDL, if it's 3 or less, you are healthy. If it's 4 or less, you're good.
So total,
you know, and it's in here. It's in this presentation. So if you put your name on my list, over there next to you, I will send you this entire presentation, and then you can ask me any questions you want as well. But this is what, if I have a client who has very high, I don't like to use the words bad, because as you're finding, none of that means anything. There is healthy LDL. LDL is typically considered the bad cholesterol, but I disagree with that. LDL is very healthy. You just don't want it oxidized. Does that make sense? So let's say you have really high LDL, though, and you have really low HDL, and you have really high triglycerides. That's like dyslipidemia right there. That means everything's backwards, right? You want it all reversed, okay? So when all of the lipids aren't the way you want them, then you want to normalize your lipids. That's what you want to do. Normalize meaning get this one this way, this one this way. You know, you're trying to get them the right direction. The best way to normalize your lipid profile is pantethine with niacin. by far the best. I've had absolutely phenomenal results with it. So good with my father that I had to halve his dose because his total cholesterol went so far down. I think it went from 260 to 156 in 3 months, which is just crazy. That's for total cholesterol, and that's too low in my opinion. I like 180 to 200. Really, 200 to me is the sweet spot for total cholesterol, but it doesn't mean anything unless you compare it to the ratio, total cholesterol to HDL. That ratio is what's important, okay? But anything less than 180, then I'm worried about your cognitive health, right? Your Alzheimer's and other things. That's a very controversial subject, but this is rules of thumb that I go by, okay? 200 to me is great. I like 200. That's a great total cholesterol. And then I want to look at your HDL, the ratio, right? And then I want to see your ApoB. And if your triglycerides are super high, that means that you are eating too much fructose. It's almost always fructose. So figure out where you're getting fructose in your environment, because fructose and glucose, exogenously, meaning you eating them, will make your triglycerides go through the roof. Because that's the signal. Insulin is the signal for your liver to dump triglycerides into your blood. Okay? Insulin. Okay, so if you want a benefit right here, you can lower your triglycerides, raise your HDL with niacin. I've tried about 9 or 10 different kinds of niacin, all with not ideal responses because people flush. And they get this red flush that's so strong that compliance is almost impossible. They just don't take it. So it's taken me years to finally settle on this one right here. It's wax coated, which means it's considered slow release, but not like the other ones on the market. And it basically gives you a slow drip of niacin all day long. The first time you take it, you might get a little bit of a flush, but then after that, you won't usually get a flush, and it works fantastic. It really, really, it works better than any niacin I've ever used. It works by far the best. Okay, so that's the one that I like. And I combine it with pantethine, which we're going to talk about soon. How does it work? These are the ways, this is how it works. Basically, it prevents LDL oxidation, and it increases HDL, which HDL itself transports oxidized LDL to the liver for elimination. It's like a transporter. So that's why you want your HDL high. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So pantethine, that's the other one. That's this blue one right here. It's a derivative of B5. And basically, it's extremely helpful at decreasing LDL cholesterol compared to placebo in this particular one, 11 to 3. I find when you combine these two together, it has a phenomenal effect. In fact, these are so good together, like they work so good together at normalizing your lipid profile that this company sells this one, which is called Endurathine. So this one's pantethine, this one's Enduracin for niacin, and then this one is Endurathine, and it has both of these in it. The reason, depending on who my patient is or whatever, I like these because it's a higher dose. So this one you'd have to take like 3 of these instead of 1 each, those kinds of things. But if you are just being preventative, this is a great one because it combines both of them into one pill. All right, but here, pantethine, now we're not talking about niacin, we're just talking about B5. Reduces your serum triglyceride by 32, total by 19. So these are amazing results. So when you combine these two together, it really works fantastic at normalizing your lipid profile. Okay, and I fixed this, and it does not, and it unfixed itself. So what it says is it appears to be especially helpful for those lowering blood lipids in diabetics. So pantethine is especially good for people who are diabetic. Okay, so here we go, so you don't have to remember. Okay, so my next favorite, if I had to pick a third one that I find absolutely critical for keeping you from having plaque accumulation, right? And I'm being specific because I'm not talking about necessarily decreasing your cholesterol. I'm talking about making sure the cholesterol you have, the lipoproteins, do not stick to your arterial walls. It's vitamin C. Okay, so here are 3 that I love. And the reason why I love these 3 is they are all 100% plant-based. And I have found clinically that plant-based vitamin C works way better. If you look it up on Google, they're going to say, nope, it's identical. Chemically, it's exactly the same structure. I can't argue with you. I'm just going to tell you I've had enormously better results using plant-based vitamin C. Okay, so there's a whole book, this book right here. Highly recommend. any and everyone read it, although not everyone's as obsessed with this stuff as I am. But this is a fantastic book. The entire book talks about how they have been proved, some doctors and researchers have theorized and proven clinically that the reason the endothelial lining becomes leaky is because it's a local scurvy. So scurvy is vitamin C deficiency. And so if you have a local scurvy, if the only thing that is vitamin C deficient is your arterial walls, then you're going to have leaky arterial walls. So just taking vitamin C, a lot of it though, you got to take about 1,000 milligrams a day, right, which is about 4 of these plant-based ones a day, right? And you can't take them all at once because your gut can only absorb 200 to 250 milligrams of vitamin C per 1 to 2 hours. So if you take a big horse pill, 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid, you're wasting it because you can't absorb it. And they don't tell you that, but your gut cannot absorb it. You'll just pee it out. So you need to take it. Don't ever buy vitamin C, even if you just buy regular ascorbic acid. Don't buy it in anything bigger than 250 milligrams. And then, because you'll absorb it, and then 2 hours later you can take another one, right? And so I try to take about 3 a day for people who have heart disease. I tell them to take 3 of one of those a day to get enough vitamin C into their bloodstream, but they take it in divided doses. And it works fantastic at healing your endothelial lining and keeping that glycocalyx very happy. Another one, this is not high on my list, but it has been proven, berberine, and this is great for diabetics to heal the glycocalyx. So basically, this is the shear stress of the blood vessels, whipping along the little hyaluronic acid threads. That's the shag carpet that I said was Teflon, right? That's these little threads. It's made of hyaluronic acid, and this berberine repairs those. So it actually, the berberine is in it. What is berberine? It's actually an herb, and it's great for people who are diabetics. It helps with blood glucose control. So I have used it. So if you have cardiovascular disease and you're diabetic, then berberine is something to look into. I have a berberine here. In fact, I think I brought one so you guys can look at it. Yeah, this is a berberine right here. So it is something I use, and it does help with blood glucose management if that's a problem. Okay, so then another one is vitamin K2. I like vitamin K2 a lot because it takes the calcium in your bloodstream and it deposits it into your bones. Because you don't want, if you looked at that arterial atherosclerotic disease progression, you'll see little white dots that get embedded into the tunica intima. And that calcium hardens the arteries, makes them less flexible, and it's harder to reverse then. And so K2 will literally bind to those calciums and help reverse the atherosclerosis. So it works great. So K2 is great, and if you're taking vitamin D3 as a supplement, you absolutely should be taking K2. They should never be taken apart because it can cause an increase in cardiovascular risk, because vitamin D3 is so effective at making serum calcium, the calcium from your food, available, that the blood calcium goes way up, but you can't get it out of your blood fast enough. That's how effective vitamin D3 is. So there have been studies, and I didn't put them up in this presentation, but there are studies that show that your cardiovascular risk will increase if you take high doses of vitamin D3, if you don't take it with K2 at the same time. So K2 chaperones the calcium. It grabs the hand of the serum calcium and it escorts it where it's supposed to be, which is not in your arterial walls. Okay, so what are some foods you could eat? Let's see here. So chia seeds are great for helping convince your body to get rid of the old oxidized LDL. It will bind to the LDL and help you excrete it. Another one is chia. Flax is also good. It lowers, so flaxseed works great. And I brought this to show you. This is what we eat in my family. My dad had double bypass, and so we all eat this now because it runs in my family. But this is our little breakfast yogurt one. It's ground flax, ground chia, some sesame and hemp seeds, and I put it in yogurt and mix it up and put a little berry concentrate on it and eat it like an ice cream in the evening as a dessert. But it can be eaten with yogurt in the morning for breakfast, and it's actually delicious. So that's a great way to get, and I put frozen blueberries in it so I can get my plant sterols. So, and that's good for your arterial flexibility as well. So it's like, and frozen blueberries make it taste more like ice cream too. So I just have my little berry ice cream, mix, and then that's what I eat instead of ice cream. I make even my dessert a health food. Okay, so plant sterols are really good also for lowering your LDL. Here it talks about how they work. And then here's some foods that are highest in plant sterols, okay? So if you want to find which foods have this, I don't know if your phone will be able to read that, it's so tiny.
Probably not.
But you can get it, I'm going to send you the
You're going to send it, okay.
Yeah, and so then, now just for good measure, because I'm a naturopath, I included some herbs, but they're not high on my list. I mean, really, this is the #1 along with this. If you had to pick any 3 to normalize your lipid profile, start there, right? Because it's just healthy. And so horse chestnut, a lot of people take these for hemorrhoids because that's a vascular problem, right? And it works really well for hemorrhoids, by the way. But it also helps with varicose veins because it helps tonify the vasculature. So basically it's healing all of that tunica intima, the tunica media, and the tunica adventitia, which is those 3 layers, right? So it works really, really well. I think I brought that one with me too. I'm not sure if I brought it with me. Anyway, okay, so let's keep going. And then stone root is great. It's been used in a lot of protocols that are published for removing calcifications, and but it also alleviates blood vessel contraction, strengthens the walls, all kinds of things. So it's all use stone root and horse chestnut are a lot of times in varicose vein formulas. You'll see that those are the 2 ingredients. And then this one's real popular right now, and they charge a ton, like I don't know, $70 or $80 a bottle or something. And they call it Arterosil. It's endothelial glycocalyx support, right? And we all know what the glycocalyx is now, because it's that shag carpet, right? But if you read what's in it, right, let's read what's in it. Seaweed, that's why they have this here, right? And then it's grape seed skin extract, green tea, grape pomace extract. So it's tomatoes, carrots, bilberries, broccoli, cabbage, onion, garlic. You know, this is all the foods we've been talking about. So you can eat it, you know, like eat it. Eat good food. That's what my suggestion is. And then if you want to find this green seaweed, Monostrotum nidum, I did look that up, and you can get it at much cheaper supplements that's just the seaweed. And then, you know, I put my concentrate, my berry concentrate on my yogurt, you know, right? And that's where I get my bilberries and all that stuff. So, like, you can be creative and get this from your food. All right, so this is not nutrition. I know this is nutrition for cholesterol, but I had to do an honorable mention for exercise. It does help. And the reason why is it keeps the ApoB proteins healthy. So that way they don't get the liver recognizes them, right? It literally helps those proteins, the exoskeleton, stay healthy. All right, so that's that. So we've got all the answers to this now. Cholesterol is a 27 carbon molecule. Cholesterol comes from the liver, 80%. Why does it matter? Well, when the lipoproteins are damaged, it sticks to the walls. The anatomy of our arteries, 3 layers with an endothelial lining and a glycocalyx. What makes arteries sticky? It's the damaged endothelial lining and the damaged glycocalyx. That's what makes the arteries sticky, right? Okay, so what makes cholesterol sticky? Glycation. That's the sugar that's sticking, right? All right, and those 2 other processes. Okay, so how and why does plaque form, and why does it rupture? Well, so I like this. It's damaged and inflamed arteries that attracts damaged cholesterol. So that both of them have to be damaged for the process to happen, right? And because if one of them is working right, it's not going to happen. It's not going to stick, okay? And then it ruptures because of a depletion of protein in the basement membrane. The protein that is depleted of is called collagen 4. It's collagen basically, and you can get it from drinking bone broth. But one of the best ways to strengthen your basement membrane is vitamin C, because that local scurvy, right? Vitamin C is the #1 nutrient that is a collagen precursor. So the precursor to synthesis of collagen in your body is vitamin C. So if you want a strong basement membrane so you don't rupture any plaques, take vitamin C every day. Plant-based, my opinion. What is the most important aspect of your lipid panel that indicates increased risk of a coronary event? It's your total cholesterol to HDL ratio. Higher than 4 is very bad. Your goal should be 3 or less. And then ApoB. Okay? And then why do statins work? They inhibit HMG-CoA reductase. What are the best nutrients to eat? And here they all are. We all went through them, right? Okay, so that's basically it. I repeated this. This slide was already in there before. There you go. Thank you guys. I'm sorry I ran late. I'm really sorry. This was a hard topic.
What do you think about red yeast?
So red yeast rice powder is basically a statin, okay? And it's a low-dose statin. I mean, food. That's where we get a lot of our medicines is from food, right? So it's the food form.